Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Unfriended. Horror is a genre that is adaptable to the times very well, and Unfriended is the recent example of that. When you think of how adaptable the horror genre is, it's really adaptable at doing that with kind of junky horror films. Horror films, they're like cheap beer. They do their job and they're done, and you kind of don't remember the cheap beer you bought, but you were satisfied and you had a good Friday night. The question with Unfriended, I guess, is does it say more than just a junky horror film? Is it more than cheap beer? Does it actually succeed in doing something more than just being a junky horror film adapted for our times? Unfriended is really like any kind of normal group kind of slasher kind of movie. The only thing that's different is the way they go about it, and I think that's what horror film is really good at. It's good to use the cinephile curiosity behind wanting to see a certain film because, oh, it's like Jaws, but it's with a killer whale. Oh, it's like this, but this. And what Unfriended does is it takes the slasher idea, the slasher genre, and those kind of character archetypes, and then puts them in a Skype chat. Now, although this film does all take place on the computer screen of a teenage girl, and you're seeing everything from her computer screen, including all the tabs and everything like that, that is your perspective. And all her friends in the Skype chat, she's kind of the innocent one, I guess. There's another friend who's the sluttier, easier girl that you always have. Then you have the nicer girl's boyfriend. You have the crazier jock friend who's that guy's friend, and then you have the fat party guy. It uses those archetypes so closely you think they might have studied Cabin in the Woods and not looked at it as a parody, but looked at it as a horror movie blueprint. They see a Skype profile that is in there that doesn't have a pic, and they're not sure who it is actually, and it starts typing to them and talking about their friend who killed herself very publicly at school, shooting herself in the parking lot because of a very embarrassing viral video that someone at her school, of course, put up and spread everywhere and shared to everyone. And this is the 1-year anniversary of that. These friends are being harassed, and you're kind of presuming that one of them had something to do with it, and they're slowly being picked off one by one, and they can't leave the Skype chat in typical horror movie fashion, because if they leave, they will die, which is a typical horror movie thing, you know. Oh, well, here's the reason they can't do the thing that you're all kind of thinking they should do, because we made up this bizarre situation. Unfriended might not seem like an original idea. It's been playing the festivals for almost like a year before it actually got this wide release, and there have been other films like Open Windows and The Den that are similar to it, but to my understanding, the fact that it uses like Facebook and Skype and a lot of sites and programs that everyone uses, it has kind of more of a realism to it, which everyone is crediting it for, and I actually think it uses them a lot better than like that recent Modern Family episode, or anytime you see in a movie, instead of cutting to someone on the phone, they have them do the video chat thing with their iPhone to a computer, which I've honestly never had that experience with anyone, and I know no one who's done that, so I always actually find that really unrealistic. This was a little more realistic in the fact that I know the Skype sound, I know what it's like to be on Facebook, I know all those things, so it made a lot more sense to me. This felt natural. It felt like I was really on someone's computer screen. And there are certain things about the internet and technology that we don't actually understand. Everyone thinks technology is really an absolute. It's really not. There's a lot of weird things that technology can do that no one really understands. So having a horror movie about technology and computers totally, absolutely makes a lot of sense. But what this film is saying about cyberbullying and using it as a horror premise, sure, that works, and it works for its kind of junky horror movie aesthetic. It's a really entertaining short movie. It's like 82 minutes, which I really like, frankly, because if it was any longer, it would have wore out its welcome. It kind of does everything it needs to do and gets out, and it does it really well. But you can't use the same horror movie types that we've been having in horror movies ever since like Halloween and shit, and then try to kind of deceive us and be like, oh, these are the people who did this horrible thing, and kind of surprise us with it, because like you're using the same archetypes, but you're not really using any character development to make us go, oh shit, that totally makes sense. It kind of meant, oh yeah, I guess you had to do that, so this kind of works in some sort of way. It needed to build to that. It needed to make sense for that character, and it kind of did in some moments, but it didn't really. I don't really fault the actors playing the parts, because they played the archetypes they needed to play very well to a T. I'm not of the generation who really got cyberbullied. I've never been cyberbullied. I don't really know many people who have. I'm not in high school right now, and this is about a bunch of teenagers. Most of the reviews of these I read are from people who are actually older than me or my age, and I think the thing is like, I think this is a fine little junky horror movie, and usually when you get junky horror movies, they're not honestly this decent, you know, they're just like junky and you're like, oh, whatever, I guess, fine. But I wonder how teens nowadays actually view this film. I might think it's fine and I like how it uses all these programs and giving it a realism, but they might actually think it's stupid. I look at horror films from when I was a teen and most of them I thought were stupid, except for maybe like Scream or something. I'm kind of curious to actually hear from the actual demo how much this actually captures, or just captures it in a way that anyone who's older thinks is the appropriate way to do it. But I think the idea that this film is trying to say anything other than being a fun little horror movie is really giving it far too much credit. It isn't really saying anything. It's just kind of a junky horror film, and that's all it really was capable of. Its attempts at breaking out from that are so fleeting that you can't really get that upset at them. It's cool that a horror film like this actually got a wide release. I've noticed like decent horror films usually don't, and so most of the time people think horror is kind of a dead genre because they're just visiting the multiplex. And Unfriended gives me a little more faith. It's not like the faith I felt when I saw It Follows, which gave me a ton of faith, or Spring, or a horror comedy like What We Do in the Shadows. Unfriended kind of makes me go, oh cool, we made another junky horror movie and it's alright, and I maybe wouldn't mind seeing it again. I guess it would be odd to see this on the computer, and it does bring up the postmodern conundrum that the thing that's being filmed is the thing that's filming itself. So that's like such a postmodern conundrum. I wonder if our pop culture world will collapse in on itself. I don't think that's going to happen this weekend, hopefully. It's an interesting idea that this kind of a thing would happen. I think it works on the basic level that most people have lowered expectations when they're going into Unfriended. I certainly did. I didn't expect anything that good. And it kind of just meets them as high as you really could, but it doesn't exceed it. It's not saying anything about our times. It doesn't make me think about multitasking and how we have too many tabs open in our computer. And honestly, why wasn't Twitter in this movie? Everybody has a fucking Twitter. Maybe they're just like most people and they just use Twitter on their phones. I don't know. I like that BitTorrent was in there. It's a fine little junky horror film that's good at being a junky horror movie. It doesn't really scare me. It was just like I watched a decent enough horror film, and usually at this time I'm reviewing a shitty horror movie that got a wide release, and this is like a good shitty horror film that got a wide release with an interesting way to go about it. I don't think I'd really want to see another film like this. Maybe this is where the found footage genre feels like it should go at this point, because you can't really do a found footage movie anymore, but you can do something like Unfriended. Unfriended might have an interesting way about itself, but it doesn't break out from being a junky, fun little horror movie. But while you're watching it, that's all you really want it to be. I don't want it to say anything about cyberbullying, and it really doesn't. It's like cheap beer. It gives me exactly what I wanted, and then I can go to sleep and probably not really think about it again, but I had a good enough time. It's nothing really substantial, but it's not really a waste of your time either. So if you have seen Unfriended and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. For those of you who are newer to my channel, every now and then I do a horror movie in the dark with the camera like this. So I decided to do it with Unfriended because it's like the computer movie. So if you have seen Unfriended and you would like to talk about it, then comment below. Oh.